The whole idea, continuing from last year and next year, is to see that we continue with this theme as ecology is economy, to actually make out that without ecology, there is no resource, and without no resource, there cannot be an economy. If you look at it, actually more than, other than services industry, which also is dependent, more than 92% of every product and service, other than space offerings, are linked with ecology in some way or the other, oceans or this or that, or transportation, etc. So why isn't it that people like yourselves, Vivek, at the helm of affairs in IFC, in the World Bank, are not saying that let us value nature. Let us not talk about ESG and SDGs and all that. Straight valuation of nature.
No, thanks so much, Ranjit, and thanks for having me. So I think you raise a very valid point, which we've been debating. I've been in the job now for 10 months, and we've been discussing it. And the challenge really is for us to say this. So we all agree that we need to start valuing nature. And we are looking at sort of early steps on how do we do that and linking it to carbon markets. Because when you value something, you have to have a basis on how do you get to that value. And it has to be something which is credible. It has to be, very importantly, the moment you start putting a value to anything, the financial institutions will have to say that we agree with the value or we disagree and this is what we want. And that's a pretty, you're really going down a fairly complicated path there. So one way that we think this will start happening, I think very quickly, is once carbon markets start to move, then, you have reforestation or afforestation, you get carbon credits for that. So that will immediately assign a value to that. Now, that doesn't then take away from the broader sort of perspective you're saying, a country that has natural assets, how do you include that? You can't include in the GDP of a country, but, for example, a country which is has a relatively low GDP, but has very rich mineral resources, it doesn't reflect anywhere in the balance sheet. And that is relatively easy to measure. And so that is what, so it's a complicated thing. And, it's sort of, I would say it's very secular because one thing leads to another. But I think the moment we can come up with a methodology on valuing nature, I think the financial markets will pick it up very quickly.
Why is the thinking there so linear? Because I'm saying, why should it be carbon markets? Let me take financial asset classes and talk the language that they talk.
Yeah, so Ranjit, two things. I think what I talked about carbon markets was more related. So there are two kinds of assets we're talking about. One is assets which will be put to a productive commercial use. So mango orchards or bamboo farms or, timber, where you're planting forests for timber or for wood. So those kind of things, I think that is happening today. I mean, you go and you can buy a farm because you're going to, when you harvest it, you are going to you will get cash from it, and there will be cash flow to repay the debt there. So that I think is happening. It may not be happening at the scale at which it's needed. What I was referring to more is when you were to do reforestation or afforestation, where you're not going to have a commercial productive use. And I'm using the word commercial, I'm just sort of making it up, where you're not going to you're really going to rely on the fact that this is a carbon sink and therefore it has value and therefore you get carbon credits. But this is not a forest that you would go and harvest for bamboo or for fruits or vegetables or things like that.
No, but actually, Pat, just to correct it, that's one way. Again, you are putting on a lens of what I would call commercial farming to forestry. We are not talking about that. If you take a wild forest of Arunachal, that is an asset class in itself because actually you're doing nothing on it, but the community owns that forest and the community will defoil the forest as is required. My question is that we need to actually open up and work and debate with people like you to give you these ideas which we have put on the ground and shown you some of the downstream benefits of Carbon Plus.
No, so I think, the World Bank actually, interestingly enough, so what you're talking about is more on the adaptation/resilience side. And the World Bank does their mitigation out of their total climate work, 53% is adaptation and resilience. So they are doing that. Now, the challenge is how do you give that commercial value? Because what I keep saying is how do we get the private sector in there? The private capital will flow into that when you can demonstrate that there is a value to that. And that's where you need a methodology which has to be tested. So I don't think we are disagreeing with you. But coming back to what you said at the end, I think we would love to hear more from you at the bank and at IFC to see how this can be done. And, we would love to continue this conversation with you in the lead up to your event in Dhaka and see how we can partner with you all to make some of this happen.
Thank you so much, Pat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Good wishes to IFC World Bank.
Hello everyone. It's an absolute privilege and pleasure to be connecting with you all on this Naturonomics Forum. I want to thank Ranjit Barthakur for inviting me and would like to record my appreciation for the wonderful work that the Balipara Foundation is doing in preserving the Eastern Himalayan region ecologically. COVID has brought about changes that may be permanent, and much has been talked about on that front. There is no doubt that many disruptions have taken place across the globe. Some has created huge impact on the humanity, and some has made positive impact on the ecology and the environment. We have also observed consumers are more conscious of the environmental and social consequences of their choices and expect enterprises to conduct their business sustainably. Employees are looking to work for companies that are committed to sustainability and has a forward-looking agenda. Investors are focusing on performance and resilience of companies that are purpose-led in their pursuit of balanced ESG strategies. Enterprises have realized that delivering financial returns is only one of the dimensions of the company's triple bottom line, which encompasses consideration of people and planet along with profit. No doubt, we have made huge advances over the last century. Industrial revolution is now at Industry 4.0, encompassing the digital era. The digital technologies are advancing the art of possible in many areas, be it healthcare, automobiles, agriculture, manufacturing, life sciences, and so on. Almost every business is getting embedded into technology. All these advancements are unfortunately coming with high carbon and resource-intensive economic models, including pollution of air, land, and sea, which need to be addressed. I do believe that technology will and need to be the enabler in fixing this problem with as much rapidity, alacrity, diligence, and attention. We also launched TCS Sustainathon, a sustainability-focused ideathon in Singapore in the year 2020. This initiative is to inspire and empower young minds to solve real-world environmental problems through digital technology. At the recently concluded COP26, we clearly heard the youth. Bold actions are needed to address climate change. More than an opportunity, it is an obligation. We need to embrace Mother Earth and environment as the other side of the economics coin. Yes, we may appear to be making sacrifices, but the net sum will be positive for the society at large. Let us be the guide and the genesis for the next generation. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a pleasure to speak to you on this subject that is extremely important, biodiversity and its impact on local communities. May I at the outset thank as well as congratulate Balipara Foundation led by Mr. Ranjit Barthakur for this commendable initiative on a subject that is of immense importance to human development over time. We have all been witness to the increasing extent of extreme weather events over time. Such events have increased in frequency, they have increased in intensity, they have increased in the magnitude of the damage and devastation they have caused. We have seen floods, droughts, hurricanes, cyclones, extreme bushfires. Today, large forests that were carbon sinks have become carbon emitters. The threat of global warming is very severe. It's an existential crisis, and we need to contain the temperatures within 1.5 degrees. We all know that the Earth overshoot day has been reached somewhere in July. And in the pre-pandemic era, it was advancing by a couple of days every year. What this essentially means is that we are consuming our budget for all the natural resources by July. And this trajectory implies that we need, in fact, 2 planets which are just not available. We only have 1 planet. And we need to arrest this trend before the natural resources of the earth are choked up and human development is completely impeded and adversely impacted. It is this trend of climate change that has been impacting biodiversity adversely. Our own experience in ITC, where we have brought this whole concept of sustainability and societal value creation to the center of our corporate strategy. And that indeed, over time, has unleashed a lot of creative ideas, a lot of fresh ideas, fresh perspectives on crafting unique business models that help us to simultaneously create economic, social, and environmental capital. And that's led us over time to become the only enterprise in the world to be water positive, carbon positive, and solid waste recycling positive for 19, 16, and 14 years in a row. I would just like to reiterate that this is a crisis of epic proportions, and all of us need to rise to the occasion with urgency so that we can leave behind a planet that is more secure and sustainable for future generations. Once again, may I congratulate Balipara Foundation for this commendable initiative and wish them the very best. Thank you very much.
Greetings, everyone. The World Economic Forum's recent Global Risk Report highlighted climate change and human-led environmental damage as key risks that need to be addressed on an urgent basis. The report warns that there is no vaccine against climate change and no one is immune to it. A further challenge is that the impacts of climate change disproportionately affect developing and underdeveloped countries, thereby worsening existing inequality and social fissures. The outcome of COP26 is a compromise. It reflects the interests, the contradictions, the state of political will in the world today. It's an important step, but not enough. These were the words of the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres at the conclusion of the conference. Now, reaching agreement in these and other large forums would necessitate holistic analysis, stress testing assumptions, and comparing trade-offs. However, the good news is about 90% of the countries are making net zero commitments. India announced a target of reaching net zero emissions by 2070, China was 2060, and Russia said carbon neutral by 2060. The investment community also understands immense opportunities in this transition. Over $130 trillion of money under asset management has now made a commitment to be net zero. We need to look no further than the past couple of years when COVID spread across countries with repercussions cascading just beyond health. The world is interdependent, and that goes both for its economy and its ecology. We often tend to look at natural resources as being subordinate to economic gains. But natural resources are a part of the real wealth of nations. They are the natural capital from which other forms of capital are created. They can play a central role in livelihoods and poverty reductions, since many communities depend on natural resources for their livelihood. Natural capital is essential for economic growth, employment, and ultimately prosperity. There is also a trend towards natural capital accounting. This helps address the foundational gap in accurately valuing our natural resources. It could definitely provide a better perspective on the link between economy and ecology, which can help to better making policy decisions for natural resources and economic development. There is an urgent need to rethink our relationship with ecology, with the natural resources of the planet that we live on. Seeing this as a symbiotic relationship which goes hand in hand with economic progress and improved well-being for humans now and in the future, this perspective needs to get embedded and translated into action by businesses, governments, and civil society at large. I wish you a very engaging, enriching, and useful time at this year's Eastern Himalayan Naturonomics Forum. I hope it will spark new ideas, foster new perspectives, partnerships, and actions to provide and enhance our natural environment. Thank you.
Hello, Naturonomics ambassadors. I'm here in Greece. I'm Desiree Driesenaar. I'm a blue economy and biomimicry professional working internationally. And I really love what the Balipada Foundation is doing in the Eastern Himalayas for naturonomics. I record this film by the sea, the Mediterranean Sea, because water is of course very important. It is raining a little, so also that is very good water for us. And I work here on the soil. Balipada Foundation asked me to tell you something about the global economic outlook. And I'm not going to tell you about figures. I'm going to tell you about communities. I am here in Parelio Astros in Greece, a little village, part of 24 villages. And we are working here on nature-based solutions, of course. What are the shifts I see? One big shift is from industrialism, polluting, wasteful industrialism, to biomimicry solutions. And biomimicry solutions are nested solutions, interconnected solutions, always smaller. You can scale it, but then you scale in fractals, and therefore they are human-sized, much more easy to implement, and they will always be without pollution and without waste, because we make sure they are. The other shift at this moment I see is from colonialist mindset to fair share and everybody their own solutions that are really embedded in local ecosystems and local cultures. I could not be there with you, but I wish you in the Eastern Himalayas really lots of fun and lots of wisdom to find your own nature-based solutions. And I'll be following you online. And if you want to follow us as well, always welcome to connect, because between the Eastern Himalayas and this small village in Greece, we might well invent it all and create possibilities for young people, high educated young people also, to come back to the villages and to choose if they want to live in cities or in villages. I wish all the other speakers very much, very good connections to the whole audience, and see you again online. Bye-bye.